Wilmer City Council's work session to order. Oh, no, we don't do a roll call here, do we? So tonight we're going to be talking about the budget, and we also have our legal counsel on the phone. And so, Rudy, are you ready? Okay. Should I start, or are you good? Oh, it has started. Okay, we're good to go. Okay, perfect. I have to hit the button here to get our legal counsel. Bob, Tim, and Robert are on the phone, so. Are you guys with us? Robert?
Tim Mayor, this is Robert.
Okay, sounds like everybody's with us. Mr. Holland, is there an introduction you want to do? I don't have an agenda in front of me, so I'm not exactly sure what we're doing here, so.
This is an introduction meeting, and so let's turn it over.
I just wanted to kind of give everyone a little bit of a preview, literally sort of an update on what we've done so far, what we've received so far from CentraCare's counsel, and then just sort of a brief preview of what I understand will be going on at the meeting tomorrow night. And I did have a call with CentraCare's legal counsel today. So if that's okay, I plan to do this very briefly, but that was really my agenda for talking to you all now.
Could you stop for just a second? You cut out there. We didn't catch who was speaking. If you would go, we heard the end of your conversation, but could you introduce yourself one more time for the council, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. This is Bob Cohen, and I'm with QTAC Rock, and that's the firm that you've hired to represent the city and the council in connection with the Rice Hospital CentraCare matter. And what I had said was that I have received the documents in the last couple of days from CentraCare's legal counsel. I did have a call today with CentraCare's legal counsel about their plan for the meeting and the presentation they're going to do tomorrow night at the council, at your meeting. And my purpose of talking to you all before the meeting tomorrow night was really just to kind of let you know what to expect and just some of my thoughts on what I've learned so far, and in light of sort of what I've learned and what I know is going to go on tomorrow night, just thoughts on that, if that's okay. I could do this very briefly.
I would just say that we're trying to keep this under 15 minutes. Is that fine with you?
Okay, I'll do it in 5. What I have received the documents, or at least the draft documents for that would be between CentraCare and the city, and sort of have a feel now, pretty good feel now for what they're proposing as the transaction. And I assume, as you all know, that there really is a sort of a concurrent transaction going on between CentraCare and the physician group ACMC, which is a really large part of all this. Tomorrow night, the CEO of CentraCare and his counsel, Mr. Dave Mello from the Lindquist Law Firm, are going to basically provide a PowerPoint presentation for you all that will describe sort of their vision of the transaction and, the structure that they are proposing for the transaction. I believe that the CEO of the hospital and the CEO of ACMC will also be giving brief remarks tomorrow night. My point really to you all is that that I have now seen the actual documents and have gone through sort of the details they're proposing, and I just wanted you to be aware that tomorrow night is really, you should view tomorrow night as really CentraCare, giving you their perspective on the transaction. And it's fine to ask questions, certainly, of that, but I think it will be necessary that, we have a chance to communicate with you or a subset of you, about what we've learned so far and what we understand to be the details of the transaction, and certainly provide you with more information so that you can ask more informed questions at a subsequent meeting. So that was really all my point for, taking your time, for this call before tomorrow night.
Did, Tim, did you have anything to add?
No, that's a pretty complete summary. I was in agreement with Bob Cohen that we wanted to approach this meeting with ears open and an open mind and listen very carefully. And then when we receive Bob's comments to the proposed structure, we'll all have a better understanding moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Robert, do you have any closing comments?
No, I just agree. I think it's good for the city council to hear from the lawyers that the council has retained to represent the city on this matter, particularly before the council hears CentraCare's presentation tomorrow night. So I'm glad that, Mr. Mayor, you were able to find time for us at the beginning of this meeting. But I would otherwise agree with everything Bob and Tim have stated.
Okay, thank you. Unless the mayor or the council has any comments or questions, I think that'll conclude this phone call.
Counsel, are there any questions that you would like to ask of our legal counsel at this point? I will just brief it by saying that none of us have seen the details. There's nobody around the council table that is sitting here that have seen the details. Bob, it's the first that I heard that Bob has seen the details, and there was a conference call that happened on Friday, and I encourage that transfer of documents to happen as quickly and smoothly as possible. So I'm pleased to hear that that has happened. I think that as a council, we need to understand that this has to be done in the open process. And so if we are going to get a brief from our attorneys, that will be done in the open process. I've talked to our city attorney about that. And so we're going to be very transparent in what we do. We're going to do a good job. We're going to be very thorough. And we're going to remember that at the end of the day, we want a good healthcare delivery system right here in West Central Minnesota. And that's one of my goals. And so I think that we've got good counsel on board, and I look forward to working with everything. And I think tomorrow night will be very enlightening. You should plan on between 2.5 and 3 hours for tomorrow night. That meeting will start promptly at 5 o'clock. It'll start with a open comment period that will happen. After that open comment period, then there will be a formal presentation, as Bob has stated to us. And then we will hear those proposals. There will be some comments that come back and forth. And then the council will at that point have an opportunity to ask questions. The hospital board will be in attendance as well. And the hospital board will have an opportunity to interact with the council as the council and or the hospital board feels appropriate. So that's the plan for tomorrow evening. I think it's going to be a very packed chambers, if you will. We're meeting out at the conference center. Wilmer Conference Center is where we're meeting. And again, I had a conversation today, and it's imperative that we're all there at 5 o'clock ready to go to work, because we're going to have a late night tonight. We don't want to have a late night again tomorrow night. So, council, any questions? Councilmember Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Are we to bring anything with us, just us, or do we need our computers there? Or,
Shouldn't need anything from what I've been told. Everything will be handed out that evening, will be given to us that evening. And Rice will be making the presentation along with ACMC, is my understanding.
Okay.
And so we shouldn't need anything along with us other than just a willingness to observe, listen, and I think we'll get some details that we're hoping to get.
Also, is that going to be recorded?
That will be recorded. Rudy will be there, or somebody from his staff will be there recording that, and it will be made available, delay, same as tonight's meeting is, correct?
Okay.
I believe that to be correct, Mr. Holland, is that right?
That is correct.
Right. And so do we have the logistics of that worked out? Kind of looks like we're working on the logistics, kind of.
We're in the process, but I've talked with the department head and made those arrangements, yes.
Thank you. Any other council members that have a question?
I think that's the conclusion, Mayor.
Thank you all for being on the phone. I apologize for calling you by your first names. I will try to be more respectful in the future. But Bob, Tim, and Robert, thank you for being on the call, and we're going to go to our next section of the meeting, if that's all right with you. If you anything to add after my comments?
No.
Thank
No,
you.
That's
Very complete. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council.
See you tomorrow. Bye now.
Bye.
5 o'clock sharp.
Okay, are we ready?
Ross, could you move that microphone to the table over there?
Okay, council, tonight, the mayor is presenting his budget to you, the council. After tonight's meeting, it will be the council's budget, but the mayor is presenting his proposed budget. It's going to be a little different presentation than what we've seen in the past. In the past, the mayor has presented the budget, and then council has basically asked the mayor if there's any questions. This year, we have a new city administrator. He has a new style that he likes to use. And so it'll be a three-pronged approach on the presentation. I will make some introductory comments. Then it'll go to our finance director, who will make some comments about our capital expenditures. And then our city administrator will do an in-depth review of each operating budget and his overall observations of the budget. So it should be a very fun evening. It should be very action-packed. It should be very full of information. We tried something new of getting you guys the information ahead of time. From some of you that have called me with questions, I appreciate that. I appreciate the ability to talk through some of those things with you. And some of you have had to just simply say, you know what, you're going to have to ask Steve or Ike that because I don't have the answer. So staff has been working on this budget since well before June. And normally what would happen is the mayor would meet with the administrator and the finance director 3, 4, 5, 6 times throughout that period of time. I will tell you that this year, I have met twice with the city administrator and the finance director, and then the finance director and I met one additional time to go over the budget. So the information that was presented to me was very thorough, it was very concise, and it was very orderly. So I, first off, want to give kudos to Mr. Holland for his approach, this new approach to the budget, and we'll see how you guys like it. But up to this point, I really enjoyed it, and I've shared with some of you that I really feel the budget is a living and working document. Of course, tonight, we will be talking about setting the levy. Once the levy is set, which will be done on the 18th, our next council meeting, next Monday night, once that levy is set, the levy can go down, but the levy cannot go up. For the new council members that may not be aware of that. The existing council members are very familiar with that process. So we're going to talk about some things that are very exciting. The overall operating funds for 2018 are $15,489,134. And that is just the operating portion of our budget. If you take your packet that you have in front of you, and I know some of you have asked me questions and said, man, that's a lot of information. So from the front page to the first blue break in your packets, that's the important, or in some of yours looks like they're green. It's either green or blue. That's the important information. That's normally what you received from the council when the mayor presented the budget in the past. The rest of the information is all information that you've asked for in the past. You want the detailed information, so we supplied you with all the detailed information. So if you want to find out how many widgets and gadgets the police department is buying, you can find out because it's in there. And so it's a very thorough budget, and it's all prepared for you to look at. So our capital improvement funds for 2018 are $17,213,585. And so what you'll find with that is that is how we normally are operating. Now, a lot of you will remember that normally we say for vehicles we have about $1 million, and for capital expenditures we have about $1 million. And so we're going to go over that a little bit. But I want to talk about one piece in particular in front of you, and that's a project of about $13.5 million, and that's the project that I identified at the retreat, and we had some discussion in regards to that. And that is an aggressive approach to address 5 of the buildings that we currently have that are on the needing repair process. And that ends up being about $8.5 million. And we will be looking at alternative funding sources for that in the city. Our finance director will talk a little bit about that more in depth. But basically, what we'll be doing is finding $13.5 million to take care of our city hall and our community center. I would like to see that located in the downtown area. I would like to see that we reinvest in our downtown, make our downtown important, and bring back the traffic to the downtown area. Again, as Councilmember Nelson said at the retreat, we want to make sure we have good public involvement in this process. It's not going to be done in a vacuum. It's not going to be done at City Hall. It's not going to be done in the mayor's office. It's going to be done in the community. And we're going to ask the community what they want. The Civic Center ICE project, we've talked about that numerous times. As recently as 2 or 3 meetings ago, it came up, how are we going to address the ICE plant? This plan also identifies the Civic Center ICE project at $2.45 million, and will take and replace the ice at that facility. Our preliminary numbers that are coming back from our consultants are telling us that we should be able to do it for that. The numbers that you've heard me talk about in the past are between 2.4 and 2.8 million. Here I'm talking specifically about 2.45 million because it's addressing only the ice piece of it. So if we want to do some of those other projects that have been talked about in the past, that could be something that the council could consider on a local option sales tax or something like that. The other thing that the council talked about at length at the retreat was our pavement management plan and our stormwater infrastructure. And so what we want to do is we want to make sure that we have money set aside in addition to that. When the local option sales tax was being talked about, our citizens were telling us, we want you to set aside more money for streets. And so this plan allows for $1.573 million to address our street as the council would see fit, if you will. So our new capital projects is that I want to focus on our capital spending. We know in our facilities reports that our facility reports have come back to us and told us that we haven't been doing a good job of keeping up. And we all know that. It's nothing that none of us are hiding under a rock and saying, no, that's not true. We all understand that. So this plan, and I've already talked a little bit about the new city hall. So what I'd like to do is have a new city hall joined with the new community center located someplace in downtown Wilmer. And downtown Wilmer has been identified by our planning and development director as basically, it is Highway 12 to Candy High Avenue, 1st Street, basically, I believe it's 9th Street. That's the area that we're kind of looking at. So we want it someplace in that area. So we'd like that to be the heart of downtown. We'd like it to be a statement. We have, as a council, looked at one potential building site. We have had some work done by our architects, and that will be coming back to the council for consideration in the very near future. And I put a price tag of that of $8.5 million. In talking with the architects, we can do that for less than $8.5 million. Very close to 8.5, but it's just a tad under. Our stormwater projects, what I'm asking you to do is consider $800,000 for the Western Interceptor and complete that. That was identified at the retreat as a priority project. We put $100,000 in the budget for this year to do the phase 1. $800,000 will complete that project from what our public works director has told us. And then the next thing that we talked about at the retreat is that we want to start looking at the phase 1 for Menards. So this budget also includes $100,000 for the Menards phase 1 project. Again, I already talked about improving the ice at the Civic Center. And again, we have the cost, and this is just the ice. It's not the other pieces that we talked about at the retreat, but it's simply the ice of $2.45 million. And then the council also identified that they wanted us to have a plan in place to start replacing our aging playground equipment and the playground equipment that was removed from our parks. So you'll remember that you put an additional $100,000 into that for this year, and staff is working on that currently to make that happen. There's also $40,000 at Miller Park for doing that playground equipment there. And in addition to that, this will add another $100,000 into the budget for next year for that playground equipment. So what you will find is that you have a balanced budget presented to you. The capital projects will be funded within the confines of the budget. And so the budget that you have in front of you has these projects funded with the payback system in place to make that happen for 2018 to start that process. Now, we're not going to go out and say we're going to take $13.5 million and do some type of financing with it. That'll be a council decision to come back to you and move that down the road and say, yes, we want to make that happen. It's an aggressive plan. The other thing is that salary and benefits for employees, we have not talked about this as a council, but we had to put a marker in there, and we do that every year. We put 1.5% increase in salaries. That's what we've had, that's what we have in this budget. Anything above that is going to have to come at a different part of the budget. But those negotiations have not yet started. I believe the letters have been received, but we have not done that. We're looking at a levy increase of 3% for a total of $144,880 increase to the levy. The other thing that we have is the Public Works Reserve Fund, and I'm sure a lot of you looked at that. There's a little over $900,000 in there, and we spend about $400,000 a year out of that. We bring in about $400,000. I'm rounding the numbers. I'm not using exact numbers here. What I have asked staff to do is to set aside $600,000 for the Public Works Reserve, from the Public Works Reserve Fund, for improvements to a street project that the council could identify in the future. Our Public Works Director has told us that that would equate to approximately 2/3 of a mile. It's about $1 million a mile. So it would be right around 2/3 of a mile of street that potentially could be constructed with that money. Or the council could look at something else in the future to identify a future need and say, you know, we want to look at that. So one of the things that when we had our audit report said that our fund balances were high in a couple areas, this is one area that was identified that the Public Works Reserve Fund could possibly be used for this type of a project. So again, $600,000 that could be allocated to a street project in the future within the next year that would really kind of set things apart within the community. Maybe it's a project that Sean has had on his list and he's wanted to get it done. He hasn't had the opportunity to get it done. This may be that. It may be a new project that we're not even aware of yet. It may be something that comes to us in the future. So the council just needs to be ready to look at that. So with this budget, let us be bold. Let us step out of the normal routines that we've been doing. Let's go after it. Let's get aggressive. Our community has said they want to see things change in our community. They want things happening. The community is excited about what's happening here. And let's be bold. Look at new facilities. Look at repairing the facilities we currently have and say, you know what, we can get this job done if we all work together. We want to enhance our health care with Rice Hospital. We know we're going to have a change there. We know something's going to change. It'll probably change within the next year. We want to be ready to look at that. So let's be bold enough when we go to the meeting tomorrow night to sit back and reflect and just say, you know what, we can make this happen if we do X, remembering our citizens. Be futuristic with our city utilities and providing good quality of life services in the parks that are the best in the state to all the residents here in Wilmer. And so with this budget, this bold budget that I'm putting in front of you, this aggressive budget I'm putting in front of you, and when you hear Mr. Okens and Mr. Holland talk about during their presentations, you're going to say, wow, this is something we've never really done before. So again, a lot of kudos to Mr. Okens and Mr. Holland for the work that they've done on this. And I just want to make sure that you guys understand that it's a bold budget. I know it's a bold budget. I know it's stepping outside of the box. But at the end of the day, we're going to get good work done. And it's going to take leadership from this table to make that happen. I can present it to you and I can say, hey, I think this is what we should do. But we have to have the entire council behind it. And we have to have citizen involvement. At the retreat, we continually talked at the retreat that we need citizen involvement in the processes that we do. So with that, I'm going to open it up to questions and see if the council has any questions for me. I thought I had a question slide there, but I guess I didn't. Oh, there it is. Okay. Now the finance director will cover the capital budget and the city administrator will cover the departments and provide his observations of the budget. So with that, does the council have any questions of me before we turn it over to our finance director? Boy, I must have been pretty thorough. See if you can get by with no questions. Mr. Okens.
First of all, I'd like to do a little housekeeping, and in front of all the council members, you should have received two handouts. The first handout is some revision pages that need to be replaced in your book, and there are two reasons for that. The first one, and there's 2 pages for each, or 2 copies of each. That's because they're in your packet in 2 different places. The first one is the general fund summary page. And the mayor talked about $15 million in the operating, and that would have been the total of $17 million less capital. There was some late minute discussions about should we have the capital or should we have the total transfers out of the general operating and remove that. And the decision was made to include the total transfers. You see that there of 3 million. So it kind of reduces, and it's just a philosophy change in the procedures that we're changing. And so that page, that's the only change that you see on that cover page, is that the one in your packets included just the capital, and this is included all the transfers. The additional items on top of capital are a debt service payment for the airport. And you'll find those on page, in your detailed packet, page 84, and your general fund expenditures, but you can look at that later. And the second item is an amount for funding the capital bonding, the major projects that the mayor mentioned, and we can get into that in the presentation. There are really two facets to the capital improvement. Oh, I'm sorry. In the second page, there was a typo in the 2006 actual column under the current ad valorem. In your packet, it was 1.3, and it's really 4.3. That was a typo. So that page, again, is the reason why you got a replacement page. Any questions on those two housekeeping items? With that, the capital improvement program really is kind of a two-faceted program, and there's two separate staff committees that review them. The first one is the vehicles and the equipment, and the second one is the capital improvement, the major capital improvements. The vehicle process is the forms, and new council members, there's a process where a form goes out to the departments on what vehicles are scheduled. They give their comments, they get the operators' comments, they get the mechanics' comments. It comes back. The staff committee reviews it and makes recommendations to the administrator, who then goes to the mayor. Mr. Mayor.
So council, if you go to the back of your packet, it's the second to the back, blue or green sheet, depending upon what color you have. It'll be the capital proposed. That's what Mr. Okins is going to be going through here shortly. Sorry.
Yep, no, that's fine. Under the vehicle process, and you'll have a spreadsheet back there too that talks to this as well. Under the fire department, there's a UTV that is being utilized for a heavier purpose than what the current UTV really can handle, is what the explanation to the committee was. And so that was one that was added that really wasn't scheduled, but it was added. And the squad cars, there was an additional K-9 unit that was requested, and the committee felt that the justifications given justified adding that one as well. That was one that was not scheduled, but the four were. Under Public Works, you'll see that they are scheduled on 3 pickups, and they are proposing, they have 2 MT trackless, which are mowers and big snow or sidewalk removal snow. They tried out a Batwing, and the Public Works Director can kind of talk to that. But one example, they used it in one of the parks, and it saved an hour and a half of mowing time for that single park, the Batwing. And so if you have questions about how that is or what it is, he can maybe answer that later on. And then they also tried a backhoe and requested to add an additional backhoe. But in doing so, they looked at their other equipment that was scheduled. There was a dump truck scheduled. They reviewed that, and that got pushed back 2 years. There was a skid loader scheduled for this year. That too was reevaluated and pushed out 2 years. And then they're reviewing the present use. We have 2 motor graders, and until they get through a snow season, that's a possibility that one of those motor graders would be eliminated as well in the future discussion. At waste treatment, you'll see there the semi-tractor and 1-ton pickup is scheduled. There is some preliminary discussion about the semi-tractor and the distribution of sludge and possibly contracting or selling that out. At this point, it's still recommended that the council look at replacing it. At the time of replacement, again, the council will have the opportunity to review that. Under the major projects that the mayor mentioned, City Hall Community Center, Civic Center, and pavement management, again, are on your spreadsheet for your capital improvement. They're all listed under bonding at this point. We've had preliminary discussions with our bond consultants about the different opportunities. It may range from bonding to partners, to grants, to lease purchase financing. There's a number of different possibilities that can be utilized there, as well as the length of time, anywhere from 10 to 25 years. And so we're exploring those and that detail as we get closer and refining if it goes forward would be available to the council. And same with the Civic Center. And then the pavement management, the mayor talked about the $600,000 going towards pavement management as well as the stormwater in here. So there's a number different there. Cooperative purchasing, we listed those, and that's where there's partners involved, and you'll see that on your spreadsheet as well. The big ones there is the amphitheater. Their local dollars is $170,000. Robbins Island, that is the legacy grant that the city presently has. And so that dollar amount has been awarded. We're still waiting final paperwork, and Mr. Brizendine can speak to that if there's questions on that. But that has been passed through the legislature, and the city does have that grant available to us. And then the main apron expansion you'll see there is a 90% federal, 5% state, 5% local. Now to the general funding projects. These are customary, and again, there's a staff committee that reviews them, ranks them as far as what the council has set as their, I think there are 6 criteria as far as the ranking goes that the committee looks at, and that council has looked at that in the past. And so they score those, and then depending on the level of funding that the mayor has authorized, we'll have a kind of a draw line. And you'll see there, information, police, and fire. Engineering, again, the traffic study that had been in the program in the past is something that kind of fell off the table and expired, and so it's being regenerated, and that will help the discussion about the future street project that the mayor talked about, and the pavement management in the long-range planning and stormwater work. Public Works Garage has some fuel tanks and garage floor drain system, and the fuel tanks, again, are something that possibly it could be discussed in the future as far as contracting with local vendors. General fund, leisure services, the playground equipment the mayor mentioned, the Civic Center sound system. The council, I believe at the last meeting, took some action to do that. There's ways to pay for it this year, and then if it would get approved, if they've already approved it now, it would just kind of like a prepayment, and so it would replenish that money. Public improvement revolving, we do that for street projects where we temporarily pay for it and then replenish it with bonding or other types of funding. The aquatic center resurface pool. Waste treatment has a bunch of projects listed there, and they're all listed separately on your spreadsheet. And then a summary of the total areas of funding that we just discussed. With that, any questions? I know I kind of went through it quickly.
Councilmember Schwantes.
Can you tell us what an e-parking system is
E-parking.
under the information technology?
I'm going to defer, if I may, to the IT director.
The e-parking tickets, excuse me, an e-parking ticket system is actually a replacement for the paper ticket parking system that they currently use. What it would allow the community service officers to do is actually track tickets in cars electronically, and then they would actually have a printer with them at that time. The major benefit would actually be in staff time, because there'd be no more manual entering of the parking ticket information and vehicle information or tickets that have or haven't been paid. It's all done remotely through the cloud, basically. So.
Additional questions on the capital expenditures that we're talking about tonight? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Okins. Appreciate that. Next, we'll have our city administrator, Mr. Holland. And so I had seen Steve's presentation before, but I have not seen Ike's yet. So looking forward to all the whiz-bang stuff he's going to throw at us tonight, so.
Test.
And I think we're waiting for this to come up, I think.
Test. Well, the last time I asked Steve to cut it short, and he never got my message, but tonight he was ridiculous. I can't believe those last 2 slides. That's it. So he cut that really short. Can you hear me? It doesn't
Yes.
sound like it. You know, the budget, the mayor said I have a different approach to it. I've been doing budgets big and small. I mean, I worked on the budget with the city of Topeka, Montrose County. We had larger budgets than this, obviously. I've worked on smaller budgets. I don't know if smaller budgets may be harder because people scrutinize the dollars a lot more. I will tell you that here, having the staff that we have here putting together their own department budget makes it a lot easier for me anyway, and having their years of knowledge, such as Steve there, having the history of the budget has made it a lot easier for me. I would tell you that being my first year here, I don't have a lot of history, therefore I can't give a good analysis, as I would say in other places that I've been, because one of the things that I like to do is I look at trends, and I ask our department heads, by the way, I don't just try to work alone on a budget, but I try to educate our department heads that we look at trends in our departments, and we try to focus on those things that we see are trending in a bad direction, obviously. But we can also look at those things that are trending in a good direction. Everything from our utilities to our vehicles, how much we are paying for maintenance. That's one of the big concerns that I've had, and over the years had some success, is that cities and counties are notorious for holding on to pieces of equipment until the wheels fall off, and they think that they're saving money when in reality you pay more in maintenance and repair, and you could have bought a brand new piece of equipment or vehicle. Not always. Sometimes that's not the case. But that's what I'm saying is I have a real interest. I think when I interviewed here just a few months ago, someone asked me about finance, and I said, I really like finance. I know that's unusual. You don't find people that really find that interesting. But I get a lot of kick and joy out of finding those things that, you know, can save us some money. I will just say that I'm going to cover, not in detail, you got the big books. We're not going to go line by line and see how much we're spending on uniforms or coffee or anything like that. We're not going to get that low. But there are some observations that when I look at this budget that stand out to me, and we're going to talk about a couple of those things. One is the fire department in a good way. Another one in maybe not such a good light is our legal fees that we pay. And I understand that the history here in the last 5 years has been up and down as far as usage of our legal department. But I think that's one area that we need to look at. I've only been here a couple of months, but it jumps right out at me for a city this size to see the amount of money that we're budgeting for legal. Also engineering, same thing. A lot of money in our engineering department. So we need to scrutinize that. Maybe that's a low number. So I caution you when I talk about some of these things, it's, you know, very little information, but like I said, based upon the history of the other budgets that I've done over the years and for different sized cities, some of these things jump out. Also, a couple comments, you know, health insurance. We're looking at, you know, double-digit hikes in health insurance here in Minnesota. That was not unusual in Missouri or in Kansas. That's kind of unusual and kind of hitting some of the people here in the metro area and in the state very hard this year. So that's a big concern. We are looking at some options that maybe can get that increase down to a single digit. So that's the good news. I hope that that comes true. So that number that you have in your budget book, that's with a 19% increase. So we've kind of budgeted for the max so that we can come down. So I hope to find some savings in our health insurance. The capital projects and employee cost, of course, that consumes most of your budget. Operational cost, have been maintained at some very good trends that when I look back the last 3 or 4 years in the departments, I don't see any really big up and downs. Of course, you had a transition change there with the assessor department. I understand what happened there. But IT department has a few fluctuations, and you're going to have that when you buy equipment and so forth. So I understand that. IT costs, when you look at, how much money you spend when we look at licensing and in particular warranties for each department and each type of software, that keeps going up. If we were to replace the software in just the finance department alone, that's 6 figures. If you didn't know that, that's 6 figures to do something like that. So it's a lot of money up front, but as I've spoken over the last few years, I don't see us adding employees so much. I see us adding more software applications, more robotic type of equipment here in the near future as things change. And so you pay a lot more up front, but as they say, robots don't get sick, they don't take vacation, and so there are some advantages to that. So we will use automation as we go forward. So I don't see the city of Wilmer's employee costs doubling over the next 10 years because we're doubling staff. So those are things that I keep a trend on, and I study. When I'm at home at night, that's what I read. Government Technology magazine, and my second favorite, Fleet Management. Ooh, I get really excited when I see those, and so I take subscriptions to those. And by the way, they're free. They don't cost the city anything, so I get that. So I read those things at home, and I'm really interested in that. We did look, as the mayor said, at the council retreat and the priorities, that the council has set. I'm probably most pleased about that because when I first got here, I didn't know if we were going to be able to do that, Mayor, and took a couple tries this year. And is it perfect? No, I don't think anything is perfect. Did everybody get satisfied? Probably not. But at least we're headed in the right direction now, right? And I think if you saw my quote from this last week, did you see that, what I wrote? It was something that I read, and it was, I'm not looking back. I refuse to look back because I'm not going in that direction. And I don't know who said that, but I really like that. And so that's the way I'm going too. I'm not looking back. I'm not looking back at old problems that we had. I'm looking for the future because I can't change anything about the past. But we can reflect on the future and have some influence. So that's what I'm focused on. Rice Hospital, the future of the downtown development, new buildings could have a huge impact. I know I'm going to talk to the Chamber of Commerce this week. They asked me to speak. In fact, it's tomorrow at lunch. And they're asking me my opinion of what we need to do here in the community. Since I've been here all of 4 months, I must have all the solutions, right? Well, I do have some observations based upon other communities this size that I've seen. And so hopefully I can share with them a few success stories that I've seen in other communities. And perhaps we can do that here in Wilmer. And I definitely, I'm going to conclude with that, and I'll just give you a little preview. I see a lot of good things in this community that I don't think other people do. And, I had a guy out in Colorado one time, and he came up to the podium, and he says, I need a new prescription, Mayor. He said, my glasses, I don't see this utopian that you keep talking about. And I'll never forget it. It was Mr. Marty. Mr. Marty was about 85 years old. And, you know, that's what I don't think a lot of people in Wilmer realize what you've got here in this community. Some of the great assets, and I think it's because maybe they just don't compare it. But that's what the business that I'm in, is I compare and contrast everything. And so I see a lot of good, positive things in this community, and I'm very optimistic about this budget. I'm optimistic about this community. I'm optimistic about what we can do to change. I think that the people that I see here today are the people that can make this change, that are willing to make those type of decisions. So again, not looking back, going forward. Last thing I'll say before going through some of the numbers is I think the department heads do an excellent job. I said something about, you know, I want to give them a few tips on how I do things, but I will tell you that the fundamentals and the budgets that they've produced, and hopefully they did that with their staffs and with the other people in the department so they understand what's going on. That's one of the key things that I stress to staff, is that when they started working on the budget, that everyone in the department should be contributing to that budget. They shouldn't be left out. Just because you're not, you know, you're a patrolman, or you know, work back in the jailing system, or you know, you're not part of the department heads in you know, a larger department, or even in the finance department, you should be contributing to the ideas and the discussion of the budget, and at least give people the option. And that's one of the things, you know, that I talk here in November. I'm going to talk to every employee. We're going to have an employee day, and I'm going to talk, and I'm going to offer the mayor a chance to talk to the employees. And one of the things that I'm going to talk to them about is the budget. And that may surprise some of them. Why is he talking to me about the budget? Well, because I believe everyone should contribute to the budget. It's probably the single most important document that we have, you know, that operates the city. That and the personnel manual are two documents that I can influence, that I hope that you utilize to make this the best organization possible. So the mayor and Steve talked about the operating funds, our capital improvements, our debt service. You know, look at the enterprise, the wastewater. Look how much revenue, or excuse me, expenditures there that we spend. You know, the total budget, $45 million. $45 million. That's a big impact on our organization and with this community. I think also when I looked at the expenditures in the general fund, and you know, there's nothing that really leaps out to me. You know, I look at this line here, the percentages. You've got 2018 and 2017. So this is what we're proposing here. And you look at the percentages, and you see this, office services and elections, you know, 175% increase, you know, but when you look at the total amount of the money in those funds as compared to others, you can see that it's not that significant. I mean, when we talk about elections, why is there a 175% increase from the 2018? Well, it's because of the election years. You look at the election years, and obviously you can see that when you have elections, it costs you more money. When you don't spend it. So there's some, you know, some good explanations behind some of those increases. Same thing with the assessor's department, that went down, obviously because of how that service is provided. So there's nothing that really leaps out at me that I want to comment on this slide. Same thing with the summary of, you know, some of our outside departments there. You got the, you know, the RAC, I call them outside, the Civic Center, the Community Center, the Aquatic Center. You know, when I look at the budget of the Aquatic Center, you know, for the, you know, 6 weeks or so that we have it open, that's a lot of money. That's for that budget for the little facility that we have. But it's nothing outrageous that makes me want to scream that we need to do something about it immediately. Now you look at the revenue that's generated. Again, oops. You look at over here in the percentages, and you don't see any significant big jump or leap. I mean, these are healthy. The license and permitting up 16%. We can see an upward trend going here. You look at 2016, and then you see it kind of leveling off here. And Bruce can talk to you about that if you have any questions about, some of the trends in our building here in the community. The next slide I want to talk to you about, and we'll get back to that. Let me grab a little bit of water. Is the cash on hand in our investments. And I think that's important. And sometimes you don't see that in budgets, and why are we looking at that? You're not budgeting that. Well, a lot of times when I talk to council about the budget, there's always going to be someone that say, well, we're broke. We're broke. We can't afford tires. Don't buy anything. We're broke. The economy's hurting. We're broke. Well, I've been hearing that for 20 years. And I had a county official, he used to be in Rotary with me, and he'd always say, well, the city may have money, but the county's broke. And I'd say, his name was Ed. I would say, Ed, why do you always say that you're broke? How much is your budget? Well, it's $50 million. I said, then you're not broke. I said, how you spend that money, and if you spend it all, then maybe you're broke. Or if you spend $60 million and you only have 50, yeah, you got a problem. But you're not broke. So I look at this, and I want everyone to understand that we do have cash on hand. We do have investments. We have a little bit in restricted funds, but the total is about $45 million. Now, some of those, obviously, are dictates by, the way we run a municipal government, and we need to keep so many months of operating funds. You cannot spend those. When I say you cannot, you can in an absolute emergency. But in general, the accounting rules are established that you do not spend that down. So I'm not saying that we spend these down either, but I'm just saying that if anyone ever tells you that the city is broke or we're in financial trouble, that's not true. So we'll talk about the departments here, and since we've already went through the capital projects, I won't dwell on it. I will tell you that the City Hall, the mayor and the council, the city clerk, legal services, again, there's that $250,000. That's a lot of money for a city this size. To be spending on legal services. And here's the other thing is, I don't even think that's all in just one department. We have legal services for the TV station. We have legal services for our labor department. We have legal services for, the general fund, basically, departments. And, now we're hiring, more attorneys for, the Rice Hospital transaction. We're spending a lot of money. Now, is that a good thing? Yes. In some ways, if you don't have attorneys, you can make some bad decisions and it costs you more money. And so they saved you money in the long run. I understand that. But, when we looked at budgeting $250,000 this year, that's actually lower. You spent closer to $300,000 about 2 years ago. So we've actually cut the budget about $50,000. I'm just off the top of my head. So that's a good thing. What I'm saying is I hope to cut it next year even further. And so every year we look at how many engineers we're hiring on the outside, how many attorneys we're hiring on the outside, and keep a close eye on that. Finance Department, I told Steve that picture looks eerily close to someone that I know in the Finance Department, but no big change there. Community Education and Rec, again, we're focusing on our facilities for the next year. That's a lot of money, $2.2 million for that. But that's a lot of people, too. Look how many, 180 part-time, summer, full-time employees throughout the community. I hope that next year that we not only spend some money on our facilities, but make some good headway on improving the facilities and making them better for our children to utilize. So that's one of the goals that I have for the next year. Planning and development, again, we've talked about that, the 5% requirement for the airport apron expansion. We'll be looking at the FBO again and that contract. There's been some suggestion that we may combine that contract out at the airport. I don't know if that will save us money necessarily. It may just save us some time and effort, but we'll look at that. Information systems, again, software, computer licensing are trending upward. I just see nothing but that department continuing to increase. Our police department, yeah, there's a search robot. They've got some 4 vehicles, police patrol vehicles that they're trying to replace. We are almost fully staffed. Am I confusing that? Are we fully staffed or not? We're one more, right? Right. Okay, so I was right. $4.4 million for 37 officers. That's a pretty good deal. I will tell you that. That's a pretty good deal. I know some of the smaller communities that have maybe 5 officers and spend $2 million a year with 5 officers. In Missouri, I spent almost $3 million for half of that many officers, okay? So that tells you, that you're getting a pretty good price per officer here in this community. So I'm really proud to see that number. And by the way, I've been totally impressed with this department since I've been here. Very professional. Next, the fire department. $711,000? Are you kidding me? That's $4 to $5 million in any other town, if you have a full-time fire department. But when you have the situation that we have here, I mean, you've got a fire department for under $1 million. That's unbelievable. I've never been in a community that spends this amount of money for a fire department and have that many people on call. Unbelievable. And, you've got some very nice equipment, nice facility, professional training going on, very sharp. I'm going to go be out there Thursday. Hopefully they won't run me up a ladder. I don't like heights. So I'm going to be out there. We're going to check out some of the training. I haven't had an opportunity yet. But again, I will highlight that. That's remarkable. They're asking for a new UTV vehicle next year. Shouldn't be a problem. Public Works, total expenditures $3.2 million. You got 23 personnel out there. They have reduced some of the outside contract work. I congratulate them for doing that. Again, we've got $650,000 in the engineering cost there. We're looking at $630,000 in new vehicles and $1.5 million for street maintenance and paving projects, which again, that's, $1.5 million, that's not a whole lot of money. That's not a whole lot of money for this size of city, for streets. I would expect to see something closer to $3 million, actually. So I think that's something that we need to look at over the next couple of years as we look at our street budget and see how we want to spend that. Street and curb, I should say. So, in summary, the budget is balanced, of course. That's required. We're not the federal government. We can't make money. make our own money, I should say. I've already talked about the legal and the engineering cost. I talked about the police and fire. You know, the recreation, there's some areas there that I think that, you know, I'd like to look at that I think are a little, trending upward that maybe we could scrutinize a little bit. I think that maybe I have a little more insight to maybe the aquatic center. I got some tips there that could maybe save us some money. But it's a small operation in comparison to other facilities that we have. We talked about the election trend. And then I put there about halfway through, do you know Wilmer is better off than most communities in America? I get the feeling around here some people don't think that's true. They think Wilmer is not in a good place financially, or, you know, the industrial park, or, you know, this is not good enough, whether it's the school system or whatever it is. But I will tell you throughout my travels, Wilmer is in a very good place. That's one of the reasons I'm here. It's because I recognize that. I couldn't believe some of the facilities that I've seen, whether it's the Midwest campus or when I took a tour out at Genio. When I go down to the mall, is it brand new? No, but there's a lot of things going on down there. There's a lot of development going on down in our south end of town as far as commerce. And I see people out there laying bricks on Saturday afternoon trying to get that Starbucks open. I see that. So I think that one of the jobs that I'm going to do is I'm going to be a promoter of this community and point out some of these things. And I think I have some credibility there because I have something to compare it to. I've seen the different things. I would just say that if you haven't been out in western Kansas, where there's maybe 1,000 people in the entire county, then you don't know what isolation is. And you don't know what people leaving, you know, an area really means. That's what, you know, the reality is out in western Kansas. And there's a lot of factors I understand contributing to that. But when I hear people that, well, we're not having growth fast enough and we need to grow further and we should compare ourselves to some of the metro, you know, cities, you know, in the Minneapolis area. Well, it's fine to compare, and I look at those numbers too. And, you know, I think that I talked about that I've been here, you know, 4 months now, and I've been, I guess, furthest north would be Duluth, maybe Bemidji. You know, been down to Rochester, been to Hutchinson. You know, I've been to all these little towns. Is it Bowersville, or is it Bowerville? It's on Highway 71 just north of here.
Browerville.
Is it Bower? Or is it Bower, no S.
Brower with an R.
How would you say it in the South? Bowerville. You know, I was very impressed with that little town. It was clean. It was organized. They had banners out. They made me feel welcome, even though I was just driving through. But it obviously made an impact on me. That's the kind of thing that I want to do here in Wilmer. We need to have some areas like that when you drive through, it's just, it's forgettable, I guess is what I'm saying. We need to make some impact. And I took my picture, with Paul Bunyan and Babe, and sent it to my friends in Kansas, and they said, "Where are you at, Washington State?" No, you dummies. Anyway. Apparently they don't see where I moved, do they? Anyway, you know, the mayor said it was bold projects. You know, it is bold. I believe it is. And I think, you know, to make decisions, to take risk, it's not easy. And it's always not popular to do, you know, build new facilities, build a new city hall. So that's why I'm asking for your support. Is I think that this will send an indication to the community that you're proud of this community, number one. Number two, you're confident in the future of this community. And number three, you're willing to put your money where your mouth is and vote for this budget. So keep those things in mind. Some of you didn't know the Hobby Lobby that was built here was from that little town in Missouri that I just came from. So just a little trivia there. The last thing is I will tell you, as the mayor mentioned, that we will talk about the tax levy on the 18th of September, and we're going to do that by law because that's the requirement here in Minnesota. But the budget will not be sent to the state until the end of the year. So as we go through this next 90 days, if there's any changes or discussions that we need to have, we still have that time to do so. And so we're going to have every second meeting of every month, we'll have finance up here talking about the numbers year to date. And then also we can discuss anything about the budget. So tonight, are you approving the budget tonight? No. Is this a draft? Yes. Will it change? Yes. Will 99% of it stay the same? Yes, probably. Unless this council says throw it all out. I guess I didn't count on that. But I hope that doesn't happen. I hope that you do support the things that were part of the retreat, because that's what this is. This is a reflection of the retreat. So I hope everybody keeps that in mind. And with that, I am done. So I'll turn it back over to you, Mayor, and we can open it up for questions for Steve or I or anybody from the staff.
Mr. Holland, are you going to want to stay there, or are you going to want to go to the?
I'm going to sit down.
Okay, perfect. So what you've had presented to you tonight is a presentation of the overall budget. We talked a little bit about how the budget was prepared. Steve went through more in depth than we have in the past, our capital, both vehicle and purchasing. And then our city administrator went through our general operating budget. I want to just point out to the council and those looking and watching from the audience, you'll see that tonight I shifted the council members down, because if Councilmember Alvarado were sitting where Mr. Okens is, he couldn't see the screen. And so I took liberty to move everybody down, so thank you for being understanding of that. Councilmember Osmus had her stuff set down and had to move, so thank you for that. I do appreciate that. But I wanted the council to be able to see the screen and the presentation, because the work that went into preparing this budget and the slides doesn't do any good if two of our council members can't even see the screen. So that is something they did, and I want to thank you for that. So, council, do you have questions specifically for, I would like to keep the questions directed at our finance director and our city administrator. And if they're unable to answer those questions, they'll defer to staff. Staff is here, but we'll try to keep it at the table here. And I would certainly entertain any questions that are out there. So, any questions from the council on the process where we are today? Councilmember Nelson.
Just a clarification, we're going to vote on the levy on Monday night?
Correct.
Is that correct?
Right. So the levy will be voted on Monday night. Normally, that would come through a finance committee, and the budget in years past, at this meeting, the levy preliminarily would be approved, and then it would go for ratification to the council meeting. But what we'll be doing is that we will take it from this work session to the council on the 18th, and there will be a very short overview of what we just seen tonight, and the finance director will have the levy amount, and then that levy amount can go down, but it can't go up. But that would have to be approved at the 18th. If we can't get it done on the 18th, we'd have to have a special meeting, because it has to be done by the 30th.
Thank you.
Councilmember Alvarado.
Okay, Finance Director Okens, I was going to ask you about, I was looking at in the special revenue funds and that sort of thing, and now these are like the first 6 months, is that correct?
That's correct, Councilman Alvarado. It's been kind of a historical trend so that you have a 6-month basis and you can just basically double them, and you're going to be somewhat in the ballpark for most activities.
Okay.
There may be some activities that are seasonal, and so it's going to be higher
Okay, and that's what I was trying to get at. Some of these, like, I was looking at the Convention Visitors Bureau. It looks like for the 6 months, it was trending down about 3%. Does something, as we go forward, does that flip? What are some of those areas that might be trending down then bounce up? Do you have a feel for that?
That was a good example. There's one other example that just because of the processes, leisure services, the way that process works is the school does processing of a number of the expenditures there, and there's always a lag period. So there won't be exactly 6 months. There may be only 4 months. Kind of like CVB, that may be only 5 months because of they have 45 days to submit their revenues. And so there are trends like that. On the 18th, we'll be bringing up a report to you through the end of August.
Okay.
Yep.
Hey, is there any one of these that really pops or changes, or we can pretty much see or extrapolate or whatever, kind of based on the numbers, what the end of the year is going to be?
I think the ones that you'll see, Administrator Holland mentioned the legal. I mean, that one is kind of depending on different things that happen, maybe with contracts or whatever the administration does that way, has been an area where you can incur more costs near the end of the year, especially when you're dealing with contracts or cable and those types of things. I think that would be the main one that would stand out.
Okay, thank you.
Any other council members that wish to make a comment? Councilmember Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As Mr. Holland had stated earlier, we aren't broke, and there's a reason why we're raising the levy.
The reason we're raising the levy is that we wanted to address some of these improvements that were needed. And so that is why I recommended that staff that we look at a 3% increase. Certainly that would be something that the council could look at in the future as to whether or not they want to approve that entire 3%. But I would strongly recommend that we approve the 3%, and then if we choose to make some adjustments, Mr. Okins talked about 2 different areas that we maybe could look at, and those areas may then drop the levy. So, but if we adopt the levy at what's proposed, then at that point, if we wanted to make an adjustment downward, it would be easier to do that, rather than to say, okay, we have to find some more money and then move upward. So that's the reason for the 3% increase.
Yeah, I think it's about $144,000, if I'm not mistaken. And
That's correct.
I don't, well, we'll look at it after we approve the levy. Maybe, like you said, that we could lower it, but I would be for that, because it's only $144,000, and we aren't broke,
Right.
like he stated. And I'm glad he noted that for the public, because there's a lot of people that think we're broke, but we aren't. That's one of my concerns.
And if it's okay with you, I'll just have Mr. Okins again talk about those. I believe there was 2 or 3 items that we're going to have come back to the council for review. And the one was, should I try to do it? The one is the semi.
Yep.
The one is the fuel system.
Those are the 2, Mr. Mayor, that I remember our discussions primarily on. Also, a point of clarification on the actual levy is we have contacted the county office, both the auditor's office and the assessor's office, since we don't have assessing staff anymore. They've indicated to us that the new construction, which increases your tax base, is not available at this point yet. And so even with a 3% levy increase on the dollar amount to the property tax owner, it would be less than that due to new construction of commercial, industrial, residential, of taxable property. And we're hoping to have those numbers by on the 18th discussion.
Does that help?
Yeah. Yep, thank you.
I'm trying to find the number for that
The third one?
truck. We had a question on the fire department too that we were looking at. The radios for the fire department, there's $100,000 in the budget for the fire department radios, and they were going to look at maybe seeing to put in a grant for that. Or are you going to come back with that?
Yeah, yeah. To talk about the semi, if I could go back, Mr. Mayor, the semi is an enterprise fund, so that would be in the waste treatment or wastewater, which the rates would pay for. Sure. So that would really have no impact directly on the levy.
One of the reasons I bring up the increasing it and why we increase it is I get calls from a lot of retired people that are, I say this quite often, they're concerned about the utilities bill and their gas bill and their sewer and water. Presently, you're paying more for your water to leave your house than coming in. And it's a major impact on a lot of people. I mean, a lot of people, because we have a lot of people over 65 in Walmart. It's going to grow. It's only going to get bigger. And they're on fixed incomes, and they have nowhere else to go to get, extra added dollars. Hopefully, they don't have to go back to work, because they'll take somebody's job. That's my concern. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Schwant, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, if I could just highlight this budget, as far as the enterprise and the wastewater goes, the council has set the rates through 2017 by ordinance. This budget is projecting no rate increase, and the council will have to take that action at a later date. But this budget does not require a rate increase at this point.
And Councilmember Christensen, to your point, if you looked at the revenues and you looked at the cash on hand for a wastewater treatment plant, there are some, and I had discussions with the finance director and the city administrator in regards to that today. If you take a look at our cash on hand and you take a look at the expenditures, our annual expenditures, and you look at our policy is what sets how much money we're supposed to have set. So if we look at that policy and then we actually do the math on it, there might be some savings. And then I think Mr. Okins told me when we were reviewing the budget that we have one of our bonds that's being paid off this year. Is that correct?
That's correct, in our program.
So I think what the council needs to do is take a good look at that and say, okay, maybe we can look at how can we adjust that to be more in line with the actual costs. When our auditor was here, our auditor had told us that we had significant revenues in some areas. And when I looked through this budget, that's one area that I identified, and I'm sure you've seen that as well, that we had substantial numbers over what our operating is. And so if we could even if we could drop our sewer cost by $1, I mean, that's a big deal. To a senior citizen, it's a big deal. $1 a month, that's $12. And $12 is groceries, and it's gas in the car. And so I think the council needs to proactively look at that, because the rate study will have to be redone in 2018. And let's look at that, and are there ways that we could potentially pay down part of that debt service? And some preliminary numbers I was running, and I'm not wanting to share that today because I haven't talked to the finance director and the city administrator about it, but some preliminary numbers that I was running, we could maybe even look at a substantial decrease. But those are the things we have to look at. We have to look at this budget as a living document, like Mr. Okins tells us on a regular basis, and see what we can do with it. So, but that's a good point. Councilmember Schwantes.
Well, first of all, thank you that the budget does reflect the work that we did in the work sessions. I think that's fantastic, and thank you to staff for the work and effort, and Administrator Holland for the work that you did in putting this together. Just a couple of things because of my newness, maybe. When I take a look at the second page of the, let's see. Anyway, it's the RAC. There are no dollars referenced for 14, 15, and 16, and I'm assuming that they were maybe in another fund and tucked someplace else, but can you share the history on that and why those are zeros?
The zeros are, the council in that time frame reclassified that. The history started out that RAC 8 and the franchise was a special revenue fund. And those funds were dedicated for RAC 8, and it built up some dollars because the costs were not at the same level as the revenues that it was producing. And so the council used some of that money to put in the sound system and the cameras and some of the stuff in this facility. Then they reclassified it to a department within the general fund. And so you'll see the franchise listed as a revenue source on the revenue side. And they made it a department. Then they made it they combined it with IT, information systems, for that time frame where you see zeros. And the discussion was to break that back out and to make it, leave it in the general fund, but make it a separate department and track those costs separately.
Okay. Another question then? Also, just for my information, transfers out on that same page, it's 84 in our book. Can you tell me what those dollar amounts are? There are 3 of them that are referenced there. What are transfers out?
Transfers out are where monies, where general fund monies or revenues are transferred to other purposes. The first one that you see listed there is for debt service on the airport, I believe. And so the revenues generated at the airport are not sufficient to pay for the operating and the debt service. So general fund does pay for that. Some of the thought behind that was the relocation of the airport freed up tax base in the industrial park, so the general fund could increase their tax revenues. So that's why they kind of make up the difference there. The second item there is for future capital projects, and that's for the dollar amount that would be available to pay off some debt service, whatever that level will be when that gets structured, when those 3 projects that were talked about, the City Hall Community Center, the ice resurfacing of the ice plant, and the pavement management of 1.5, those dollars are available to structure a debt depending on the length of period of time and how that all kind of fits together when that discussion continues. And the remaining amount is the amount transferred into the capital improvement and accounted for over there. The reason that they are accounted for separately outside of the general operating is the charter allows that money to stay for more than just the fiscal year until the projects are completed.
That is fantastic, and I just want to say, how did you do that without notes in front of you?
30 years.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Councilmember Fagerly, followed by Nelson, followed by Plowman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Steve, on the library, they haven't asked for anything this year. They just get their automatic 3% that's required by the state or whoever it is.
The city gets notified from the Department of Education on the minimum required for maintenance of effort. And we receive that. We've had conversations with the county as well as far as our share of the maintenance, because there's 2 facets to the library budget. The joint powers agreement with Candy White County for the maintenance side, they do the maintenance and then bill us. And then the maintenance of effort from the Department of Education, we've been notified of that as well.
Okay.
There is if I could just, the reserve or excess local option sales tax money, I think it's around $170,000. The conversation with the county is that they will be coming to the city asking to use that for the need to do the HVAC and those types of, due to the decommissioning of the hot water heat from the utilities.
Just for the library building.
That's correct. They didn't know if they would need to do that yet this year or next year, and so that's why that one is at 0 at this point. And it may still be coming this year. They don't know the timing on that yet at this point.
All right. And then one other one, that's for you, Mr. Mayor. Have you met with the special interest groups or whoever that ask for money, and will they be coming before us?
No, so for the outside interest groups, what I did is I instructed the staff to contact each of the special interest groups and bring back a report as to what their requests are. And those are included in your budget, in the back of your budget. It's under civic requests. And so the whole documents are all there. Everybody who submitted their information to us has been funded in this budget. And the finance director and administrator and myself have all worked to put that into the budget. And I don't believe anybody asked for additional money. I think everybody stayed the same. Nobody asked for anything additional this year. And we did not have the food shelf come back. When we contacted them, they said that the council voted not to give them money last year, so they were not going to come and ask again because they didn't want to go through the request process, just simply be told no.
Okay.
So it's kind of demoralizing to them when they show up and aren't funded. So, but I mean, it was a long shot. We knew that.
All right, thank you.
So that's where that's at. So the community are all in your packet. Councilmember Nelson.
Just a question. Other years when we've raised the levy, we've received information, basically how it would affect individuals or a specific, but we also got information about where we're at with other communities our size. I'm just wondering if that information is available to us to review, to take a look at I know one of the meetings I was at, they talked about explaining the entire tax statement to people so they understood where their money was going. But I'm just curious if we can get some additional information on what we're proposing and how it would change, what change it would be to the average citizen or the average homeowner with that in addition to our community.
Okay. We certainly can do that, yeah.
So we talked about that, actually, we talked about that this morning, as to whether we're going to include that slide or not, and the decision was to not include the slide unless it was requested. The slide is prepared, the slide is ready, and I'm sure that Mr. Holland will probably have it in his notes that you'll get on Friday, so. But you'll for sure get it by the end, I mean, when the next presentation comes, you'll have it. Could we possibly have that for the meeting on the 18th as well, please, Mr. Elkins?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, we have those calculations, and we do a comparison to 19 regional centers classified by the league and the coalition. So those are the communities that we use in comparison. And again, the discussion with the county is that they should have the taxable tax capacity conversion of the market value to us available for the 18th discussion.
I think it's important for us to know that, but I think it's also important for the community to understand that piece too.
Okay. Next, Councilmember Plowman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a few nuts and bolts items, but I think I'm gonna save those for another time or another comment. Mr. Mayor, Mr. Holland, Mr. Elkins, thank you for your time in preparing all this and your hard work and all the department heads that took part. It's a well-presented, well-outlaid document. When we start talking about taxes, I usually cringe. I mean, just because in a different world, I would try to do away with taxes entirely. But it's not a different world. This is the present, and this is the reality of it, and this is the job we're tasked with. But fees are felt anytime that fees are raised, and we all feel the impact of rising costs on our households. Our money just isn't spread like it used to 5-10 years ago. Some costs are going up really high. But in listening to the presentation, I guess this is just kind of where my personal opinion comes in. I'm trying my best to look at this document in its totality and what it really means. And not so much individual raises and the 3% levy raise. At first blush, you want to go, whoa, 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 what, why are we doing that? But I think more appropriately, return on investment for our community. There's all kinds of angles that it can be spun and looked at. One great example of that, legal costs, for example. If we can do things proactively and we can get, a well-organized, well-running machine that stays greased and stays operational, I think over time those legal fees will start to trend downward. And there's all kinds of different collateral expenses like that that play into everything that's a part of this. So I really do appreciate the comments by our new administrator, especially the positive comments about, where we're sitting as a city, and how this is kind of focused on more of a proactive approach rather than a reactive approach, because I think, as is the case in business, when you can go at it and, take a retreat, for example, and the items that we outlined there and go into it with a good, solid plan, even if we have to experience the uncomfortability of raises or, discussing taxes and all the grit that comes along with that, I think what we're doing here is very responsible in terms of trying to give our citizens the best return on investment possible and creating a community that has the infrastructure that they deserve and as well as the amenities that they expect. And so with that, again, I appreciate the work that's gone into it, and it gives us a lot of solid information to ask more questions on and to bring into the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Maskey.
I would also offer the same thank you for putting this together. It's very comprehensive. I think back to our retreat, and I think the comments that Councilmember Schwantes just made that this does address exactly what we talked about. I guess I had dreamed at that retreat that we might get some of these projects done in my tenure serving on the council. I didn't expect to see a budget where it's feasible to do it in a year. I think that's, as you described, bold. I think it would definitely be an interesting thing. I don't know what we would debate and discuss and have discord over the following year, because a lot of the things we've talked about and we've argued about, passionately about, are all included in this one budget. So it's a lot to digest. I appreciate it. I think this would, and it does fit right in line with what we've talked about. I just leave myself wondering what we'll talk about afterwards, and I guess that's a good problem to have.
Well, maybe you could school me on parliamentary procedure.
You will never learn it. Just a couple of little questions. You did mention the amphitheater, and you did have something with partners up there. Are those identified, or are those potential partnerships we would identify in the future?
Those partners have been identified. Those partners have, I've had conversations with those partners, and the discussions that have happened is that if the partner funds do not come in, the city funds would not be expended.
Okay. And then,
And I believe that that is one of the reasons why I'm asking the council to approve the Robbins Island Master Plan Task Force, is because the people that, some of the people serving on that are people that have expressed interest in making sure this happens.
okay. And then the sound system piece, we had talked about that, and we didn't have all the answers last time we were here, the $50,000. We have it here in the 18, but that might not even be true. That could be out of the 17 budget if it went through reallocation, or am I missing that?
Yeah, I'll have Mr. Okins address that. Yeah, it's going to have to come out of 18 because the monies were not there.
Yeah, the technical way of that is handled is that if the council approves it this year, as part of that action, you would say it's funded out of 18, and we have the public improvement revolving fund that pays for street projects. It would be paid as like a prepayment, and then when the budget rolls over in 18, that prepayment would go away as far as like a receivable or a payable. So it's just a technical timing of the way that is. It's not good practice to pay costs now for future budgets, but if the council chooses to do that, that's the way we would handle it.
And do you know, and I'm going to catch you flat-footed here, I know that, how much money are we still paying off on the auditorium on dollars that were taken ahead of time?
I will have that for you, Mr. Mayor, in my report on the 18th.
Okay, so so when we did the auditorium, we took some of those dollars and we captured them and pulled them back. And we took it out of the insurance, out of RAC 8, and the public investment fund, correct?
Yep.
Yeah.
And the insurance rebates and that we're getting from the league is what's paying that off. And so as part of my report on the insurances, I've got that final report as well, as far as when we've been increasing the deductibles. I'll include both of those together.
And so I had proposed to the council last year, paying off all of those expenditures, you may remember that, and so that we would be on the auditorium, basically the bill would have been paid. That was not approved by the council, so there still is a debt there, but I don't think it's very much money. I'm thinking it's less than 100,000, but I don't remember exactly what it is. But Steve will have the numbers for us, for that, the exact numbers. Anybody else wish to speak to the budget? Councilmember Alvarado.
You know, I'm new, so what does L period, O period, S period, T period mean?
Local option sales tax.
There you go.
It's an acronym that is not, I guess, would be used in the future.
Yeah, that number will not be, that name will not be used in the future. In the future, we'll call it local option sales tax. There are some in the community that feel it has a negative connotation, and so they've asked that we quit using that. So I've shared that with the finance director, that we choose not to use that in the future.
We once were lost, but now we're found.
Call it what you will. Council, Councilmember Alvarado.
I'm not done. I'm almost done here. City Administrator Holland, you talked about trends. When I was looking through this this document, what I was noticing And what I'm noticing in our office as a business, I'm noticing that our mail volume is going down. And I'm noticing that the amount of expenditures on postage is going down. I know these are small dollars, but we just talked about small dollars with a $12 a month for our family. That postage number maybe could be cut in half as far as what's being allowed to be, budgeted. Because look at those trends. If you look through what's being spent, it looks like they might be trending down. So anyways, that was just an observation I noticed. I know it's small dollars, but it's something.
Small dollars make big dollars. One of the things that we have is there are some of the requirements where the legislature hasn't caught up with technology. And so it's requiring us to send maybe a certified letter where maybe a red receipt on an email might do the same thing, but we still have to do it the way the state statute says. So we're always going to have postage costs. So, but that's a good point. That's a great point. Go ahead.
I'm done.
Okay. Oh, I thought you said you had a couple more questions.
Nope, that's it.
Councilmember Meske, I thought he was giving me the thumbs up. I think he was finally telling me I learned something tonight. So anyway, so that's a good thing. Council, before you is a very aggressive budget. And one of the things for this budget to be successful is for us to get behind it, to support it, to tweak it, to make it better, and to have public input. And so I urge you to make sure that you get out, talk with your constituents, talk about what it means to them. But then let's also, as when we had our audit, let's look at some of those areas where we have some fund balances that we maybe can decrease some expenditures, and maybe we can save that senior citizen some money on some costs by not having to increase those costs. So the example that I used was on our wastewater treatment costs. So thank you very much for receiving our report today. And again, I want to thank Mr. Holland and Mr. Okens for the work that they did along with the rest of our city staff. It's a good budget. It's an aggressive budget. And one of the things that I've asked the administrator to do is that when questions get asked, so from here on out, from tonight on out, we will have a question and answer document that will be sent to us and we'll have available to us. So as an example, the mayor asks the question about X, how is X funded? And so that answer will be written out. There'll be an answer to what that is, and then all the council members will have that. So that if you have that similar question, like Councilmember Nelson asked, where is this particular form? So the form will, and a question on where the form is, here's the form, here's the cost, and here's where it is. And that document will be in front of you all the time so that you can refer to that so that you can refresh yourself as to the discussion. Again, thank you very much for the meeting. I told Mr. Holland we're going to be 2.5 to 3 hours, and we're done in an hour and 45 minutes, and we had 20 minutes of that was talking to our attorneys. So you guys have done good work tonight. I'm proud of you. We're getting good work done. We're getting the citizens' work done, and we have a budget to chew up. And if you have questions, get with Mr. Holland and Mr. Okens, and we'll make it happen. So with that, I think we are concluded unless somebody else has something else they want to talk about. With that, we are concluded. Thank you.
This goes to show what you have a plan, and you put it in place, everything else